Hello and welcome to this week's episode of SnapShot. Today we're going to take a look at animation and the importance of good sound. Sit back, relax and enjoy. So, what is animation? Well, animation is the process of creating motion by displaying a quick display of sequence or static images, and it was found as early as pre-cinema through a device called a zoetrope. A zoetrope is probably the simplest form of animation, but it offers great entertainment. It works by viewing images placed in a cylinder, and when that cylinder is spun it gives the impression of motion. Its downfall, however, was its lack of realism, which promoted the Fleischer brothers to create the next big step in animation, which was cell animation. So, what actually is cell animation? Which was a technique used by Fleischer's biggest competition back in the early days, which is of course Disney. Again, it's a long, painfully rewarding method of tracing frame by frame. The work which Disney produced was phenomenal, particularly from the experimental filmmaker Oscar Fischinger, whose work in Fantasia is still relevant to today. So, what came next? Well, it was a technique called rotoscoping, and at the time animators thought this was revolutionary, and it brought to animation and cinema the realism and personal feel that had been missing in the early days. Like I said, it works by tracing over footage frame by frame, which often takes place over live action footage. Rotoscoping and the Fleischer brothers in particular brought us beloved characters such as Coco the Clown and Betty Boop, whose realism and characteristics were like nothing we'd ever seen before. To conclude our evolution of animation and fast forward to the modern day, the animation scene is dominated by digital animation and CGI. Although some animators are fighting to come up with techniques to give the hand-drawn feel back, there's no doubt of the benefit of digital animation. Cost, efficiency and creativity are just some of the positives from digital animation, and companies such as Pixar are really pushing the boundaries of what is achievable. So just step back for a moment and come back to Disney. Obviously we all know them now as an industry leader and just a massive powerhouse. But how did they get their big break? Well, it wasn't just Disney's big break, it was Mickey Mouse's big break for that matter. And it come from the unforgettable Steamboat Willie. This was another example of cell animation, but the real trendsetter here was Disney's brilliant use of sound. Now, it wasn't just the use of sound, but the syncing. Other filmmakers had implemented sound at this early stage of cinema, but the sound was out of sync. So now, if you take a few seconds to listen to this clip with it out of sync, it has an effect, but it kind of pulls the audience away. Now, when we put this clip into sync with the audio, it's absolutely brilliant. And like I said, it wasn't the first time, but there's no argument that it was the first time it was used effectively and successfully. The film propelled Disney into the powerhouse it is today. The playful and cheerful sounds that accompanied the beatings of the hands over the washboard were unseen and really drawn on the audience's emotions. To borrow a wonderful phrase, image equals information, sound equals emotion. To kill two birds with one stone, we'll continue to look at the importance of sound while getting our first look at a beautifully simple type of animation called flipbook. Now, flipbook animation is pretty much what you can see in this video. The artist draws a single frame on every piece of paper, then flicks through it. But what's missing? Sound. As much as we appreciate what we see, it's a little lackluster and even lifeless. Now watch that same clip with a little sound added. Wow, that difference. Foley sound is more accessible than most of us realise, and it makes the difference between just being good and just being plain brilliant. Excuse the pun, but to flip forward in time and look at a little bit of stop motion. We as an audience were blown away back in the 80s with Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer. It was creatively unseen on such a large scale before. Artists such as Keena Grannis to this day have paid homage to that original piece of work. Now, stop motion is arguably the easiest of animation to pick up. We pretty much all have an iPhone and we can now take a series of photos and stick them together in an editing program such as I did in Final Cut. Now, it's that simplicity that is drawn in YouTube creators such as Mystery Guitar Man, who uses it in a completely unique way. He manipulates music tracks in such a way that the piece of music on his own would be impossible to play. But by recording a single frame of sound, you can piece that whole thing together and basically emulate a whole symphony orchestra. It's absolutely incredible, and I'd recommend anybody to go and watch it. So, what actually is digital animation? Well, digital animation allows for a much smoother and cleaner production process, which via, say, a graphics tablet, the artist can draw directly onto a computer using a technique called onion layering. An artist can easily see a previous frame right there in front of them. It's much quicker, much more efficient, and by using the power of the computer, it allows the artist to be as creative as they want. So our final segment of Snapshot this week is going to be soundtracks. And soundtracks and scores can and often do make or break a piece of media. We can expect to find 3 different types of sound within film and TV, which is dialogue, sound effects, and music. There are of course many subcategories and techniques within those 3 points, but they are in brief the main ones and what we're going to stick with today. When considering animation, we have diegetic sound, which is everything in a scene that a character can hear, and we have non-diegetic sound, which is sounds that are not found within a scene, such as a voiceover or a film score. Non-diegetic sound can really help an animation stand apart. Let's take this transition for example. First we have it without sound. Nice, but it could be better. And now with a simple sound effect. Simple, just feel the difference. It feels a million times better. Of course there are different types of sound too, such as internal diegetic, which is something like the thoughts inside an actor's mind. Even if that's unaware to the actor themselves, we as an audience can hear it and it adds a unique edge to any story. Music and sound is a very clever storytelling technique, and many would argue it's the best way to engage the viewer's emotions. 2 types of sound which are key players in achieving this are parallel sound and contrapuntal sound.
All around me are familiar faces.
Now, parallel sound is music which complements a scene. So, if we take a war scene for example, you can expect the music to either be exhilarating or rather quite sad due to the nature of the scene. And it really complements the footage that you see. But say if we swap that with a jingle now, and it just pulls the audience away, so it's important to choose your song wisely. So the polar opposite to that is contrapuntal sound, and that is where the sound and image don't exactly match. And this, if done well by a director, can really play over your head. So we'll take this horror scene. Of course it's scary and the music is what we'd expect. But now when I swap that out with, say, a nursery rhyme, and for some reason we get chills. But why is this? Like, it's meant to be a cheerful song. If done correctly, songs completely different than what was expected can entice emotions that typically are hard to reach. So to conclude this week's episode of Snapshot, we've really took a walk through the history of animation and even looked at some of the pioneers such as John Lasseter and his great work for Pixar. But we also delved into the importance of a good soundtrack and indeed sound. You know, today's industry is dominated by technologies such as this camera that I'm shooting with now. But if you could hand me a zoetrope now and put some frames on there, I can tell you that I'll be entertained for hours and hours. Animation is of course one of the truest art forms. After all, it comes straight from the artist's brush, it's from the hand, it's a very personal feel. And indeed, Foley sound, the sounds of, your feet crunching on snow, it's a very real feel. And that feeling is often lost in today's Hollywood. But if you throw a few thousand frames at me, add a good score to that, and then I can tell you I would prefer that over a Michael Bay boom any day of the week. So that's been Snapshot for another week, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.